Hello and welcome to the Vita vs 3DS 2013 Year in Review. So in this video we'll take a look at and compare how the Vita and how the 3DS did in terms of sales numbers and review scores for all of 2013, and then discuss what this means for both of the platforms. So in the end, like I usually do, I'll do predictions for 2014. If you want to check out the 2012 video Year in Review, you can do so by clicking right here. But without further ado, let's discuss sales. So the sales section of this video will take both North America and Japan into account. Accurate sales tracking for the rest of the world doesn't really exist, so this is the best that we can do. Software sales will be discussed, but hardware sales are the focus of this video since the only region where we get anything really more than just ordinal rankings for the games are Japan. Finally, digital sales are not included in this discussion since they are not really tracked at all. So let's start with North America. The hardware sales for North America are tracked through a company called NPD. NPD no longer makes the sales numbers public, but reliable sources such as Cream Sugar on NeoGAF have had access to them and have been sharing them monthly. One other important thing I want to mention is that I'm including December 2012 numbers in this analysis since last year's year in review only went up to November. December 2013 numbers will be included in next year's analysis as they won't be out by the time of this video. So from the time period of December 2012 to November 2013, the sales for the Vita and 3DS in North America are as follows. PlayStation Vita sold 570,000 units, or 370,000 units exclusively in 2013, while the 3DS sold 3,980,000 or 2,780,000 for the first 11 months of 2013. So compare this to the 10-month period in last year's year in review, where Vita, well, compared to that specific time period of 10 months from Vita launch to November of 2012, Vita sales have actually decreased 44% year over year. Meanwhile, compared to the same 10-month period, or 11-month period rather, 3DS sales have increased 99%. So without discussing that yet, I'm just going to move on to Japan and we'll discuss that all later. So on to Japan. The sales analysis for Japan will run from December 31st, 2012 to December 29th, 2013. Hardware sales in Japan are tracked through weekly Media Create sales releases. So although top 30 software is also given in these releases, because they don't really include digital sales and because they don't really offer cumulative platform rankings, I won't be analyzing them, but I'll still talk about them briefly. So from the period of December 31st, 2012 to December 29th, 2013, the sales numbers for Vita and 3DS in Japan are as follows. PlayStation Vita sold 1,224,532 units, whereas the Nintendo 3DS sold 4,882,040 units. Compared to the previous years, Vita sales went up 77%, while 3DS sales are down 11% year over year. So what exactly does this mean? Well, first and foremost, the 3DS has proven to be an unquestionable success outside of Japan and inside of Japan. So you'll remember last year where I expressed worry for both the 3DS and the Vita in the North American market, since both had sold less than 2 million units from February to November. Well, the 3DS sales have doubled in North America since last year, moving into a nice, healthy position with regards to sales. And it is, we're also often seeing exclusive 3DS games such as Luigi's Mansion or Animal Crossing or Pokemon appearing in the top 10 NPD sales, which is really impressive considering that most of the titles on that list have multiple SKUs, like Call of Duty Black Ops appearing on, so many consoles, or Battlefield or whatever, or the sports games. That's, they are going to appear on that list much easier because they're on so many platforms. So the fact that a 3DS exclusive game with one SKU is appearing in a top 10 list with titles with multiple SKUs on multiple platforms is really, really impressive. That's, something to really note. So you'll also remember me saying that this is the time to worry about the Vita. So my fears were completely justified, it seems, because Vita has had an absolutely pitiful performance in the North American market in 2013. So 570,000 units. in 12 full months, and that's including December of last year. If I didn't include that 2012 December, we're looking at 370,000 units for 11 months, which is pitiful. I mean, 3DS sold twice that in November alone. Just in November, 3DS put up over 700,000 units sold in November. And Vita, for the whole entire year, couldn't even do half that. So, if in 12 full months, I mean, Vita couldn't even muster up 500,000, or only mustered up a bit over 500,000 units sold. Aside from last Christmas, Vita never really put up triple-digit or six-digit sales in any month in North America. So, and sales even dropped as low as 15,000 units or 16,000 units sold per month in the summer. Like, I think in July and August, it was 15 and 16,000 respectively. So that's, really, really bad. You just don't see consoles selling that low. And I remember looking at the NPD sales for Japan, for GameCube, for example, and seeing like 30,000 units and thinking that was disgustingly low. Vita is going way lower than that, which is just ridiculous. So because of this, big Western third-party developers have all but abandoned the platform as we see now, and likely won't return until Sony can turn things around for the device. And this is an absolute shame given Vita's potential as a device to play Western games on. Imagine a Vita-exclusive Mass Effect game, or a Vita-exclusive Elder Scrolls game. These dreams just simply will remain dreams for the time being. So now on to Japan. 3DS definitely continued its dominance this year in Japan, selling just under 5 million units for the year, which is only slightly less than it sold the year before. These hardware sales are reflecting in software sales, as 3DS generally locks down 10 to 15 of the top 20 games for every single week in Japan. 3DS also regularly outsells all other systems combined, and that really doesn't look to stop anytime soon. Most importantly, 3DS's continued Japanese success means more Japanese titles, which means more localizations, which is great for all those Japanophiles out there, like myself. I'm into Japanese games that love localizations. 3DS is going to see a ton of them. So for Vita, while Vita is definitely getting thrashed by the 3DS in Japan still, it's putting up a much better fight this year than last year. Sales are now 4-1 in 3DS's favor, not 8 or 9-1 like it was last year. I remember last year, for the full year that Vita was out, it only put up about 600,000 units. This year, sales are well over 1 million units. It's almost pretty much, it's 77% increase year over year, and it actually surpassed PS3, PSP, and it beat out Wii U this year to earn its second place spot for all the consoles this year. And it's easy to see why. I mean, Sony is really trying to position the Vita in Japan as the go-to device for 4-player co-op monster hunting. So Phantasy Star Online 2, Soul Sacrifice, God's Eater, Tokiden, and the upcoming Soul Sacrifice Delta and Freedom Wars, these are all strategically chosen for Vita, and all have helped increase sales. So Vita sales are not what I would consider stellar in Japan, but it's definitely out of the danger zone now. It's definitely at a healthy level, and I expect it to improve even more next year. So to recap, 3DS sales were stellar in Japan and North America for 2013, which means a continued stream of great first and third-party Japanese support, as well as a perhaps renewed interest in the platform for larger Western third-party publishers who have been largely ignoring handhelds since the PSP. So Vita sales in North America are extremely poor and very worrying to anybody who is hoping that the Vita is going to garner some Western big third-party support, because it simply won't at these pathetic low levels of sales. But its Japanese sales have improved to a healthy status, which means we're going to see more Japanese support and localizations. So sales numbers are extremely important. They ultimately determine the success of a platform and the relevancy that platform has to publishers who make games for it. More sales generally mean more games, but sales numbers alone as numbers virtually mean nothing to the average consumer. Games are what matter, and thus that's what brings us to this section, review scores. which platform had more highly reviewed games in 2013. So the site I'm using for this analysis is GameRankings.com. GameRankings is a review average site which takes into account all the major reviews for the game and finds a mean score for them. As usual, I'm using GameRankings.com instead of Metacritic.com since Metacritic has a history of putting more value into some scores than other scores, and also because they've been known to assign scores to sites which don't really use them. So the criteria I'm using for critical acclaim is 80% or above, so an 80% review average or above. So in order to be included, a game has to be reviewed a minimum of 10 times, since that's a decent sample size. Any less than that sort of brings into question the sample size. So without further ado, let's take a look. So Vita had 11 games rated 80% or above on GameRankings.com. So in order, Hotline Miami, Tearaway, Velocity Ultra, Spelunky, Guacamelee, Yeast Memories of Celceta, Pixel Junk Monsters HD, Dead or Alive 5 Plus, Stealth Inc. A Clone in the Dark, Lone Survivor, and Muramasa Rebirth. So 3DS had 14 games rated 80% or above. So starting at the top with a 92.52 is Fire Emblem Awakening, The Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds, Pokemon X, Pokemon Y, Animal Crossing New Leaf, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, Etrian Odyssey 4, Legends of the Titan, Shin Megami Tensei 4, Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, SteamWorld Dig, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, Etrian Odyssey Untold The Millennium Girl, Mario & Luigi's Dream Team, and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. Okay, so in terms of quality software, contrary to popular belief at the time, the Vita actually had more critically acclaimed titles than the 3DS did last year. Much more. It wasn't even close. The Vita had 18 games rated 80% or above on Game Rankings, and the 3DS had 7. So it wasn't even close. I mean, it was an 11 gap difference. And not only did Vita have more games, but it also had more exclusives. The games that Vita had, I think it had 7 exclusive titles rated 80% or above, whilst 3DS only had 4. The big story here for 2013 is 3DS really turning it around, doubling the amount of critically acclaimed titles it had in 2013. It has a 100% increase, whereas Vita actually has a 39% decrease in titles its critically acclaimed titles it had this year, as opposed in 2013 rather, as opposed in 2012. So with this in mind, the decrease that Vita's had and the increase that 3DS has had, and with everything, taking everything into account, with this in mind, I'd like to make 3 points. So my first point is that, like last year, people who act like 3DS has a much larger library of quality games than the Vita does are really misinformed. So while the 3DS did have a better year this year in terms of quality games, the Vita was right behind it. I mean, 14 to 11 isn't that much of a huge gap. So people who act like the 3DS has like mountains more games than the Vita does, or mountains more good games than the Vita does, it really doesn't. I mean, they're pretty neck and neck in terms of, if you take all the games that everyone considers good, they're very, very close, especially if you take into account last year. It's even more close. And this is even more impressive for Vita, given my second point, number 2, that nobody is reviewing Vita games. Nobody. So, as mentioned before, 10 is my review cutoff for 10 is my cutoff for my minimum sample size. I will not go lower than 10 because that's too small of a sample size to be considered an average review. And you can get, you can really skew your results that way. Either skew it bad or skew it too high or whatever. So any less than that, you don't really get any form of critical consensus. However, when I looked at the list, I noticed that many prominent Vita games were missing. So just for giggles, I reduced the minimum amount of reviews to 5 and I hit go. So when doing this, Vita had 20 games rated 80% or above on GameRankings.com, almost double, whereas 3DS had 15. It only added one game to its list. Vita added 9. So this point is actually rather scary. Consumers have grown so apathetic towards the Vita that reviewers aren't even bothering to review Vita games anymore, which generally leads to even more apathy towards the device. So now, not even just take this with a grain of salt, because not every title that had an 80% review average with 5 reviews that I included there or less would have kept that 80% if it was reviewed more. Some certainly would have, though, which could have made the section look a lot different. So this is kind of scary, that no one's really reviewing Vita games. That even big companies like big media outlets like IGN or GameSpot, or even special like Pocket review sites, they aren't reviewing Vita games, or at least a lot of them. Like Walking Dead, for example, wasn't reviewed 10 times. Dragon's Crown, a huge Vita game, was only reviewed 9 times. That's kind of scary. Whereas the PS3 version was reviewed a lot more. So that's a problem. That's going to actually be a problem going forward. That's less exposure for Vita games. So my third point in defense of the 3DS's list is that the 3DS brings exclusives. The vast majority of the top-rated 3DS games are exclusive to the system, while with the Vita, it's the opposite. Tearaway and Yeast Memories of Celcita were the only Vita games on that list that were exclusive to the system. The rest were either ports or multi-platform titles. Now, I'm not going to get into this whole, ports are worth less than exclusives. It's not to say that ports and multiplats are worth any less than exclusives, because they're not, and anybody who says that is absolutely fucking ridiculous. That's just an absurd fanboy argument trying to get one system over another one. Like multi-plats and ports, some of the most fun I've had this year. For example, on my 3DS, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate was one of the best games I've played this year, and it was in my top 5. It was awesome, and it's a port, or it's a multi-platform title rather, of an enhanced port of a game, but it's still fun. Same thing as Dead or Alive 5 on Vita. I had a lot of fun with it, even though if it's a multi-platform or a port or whatever, or Hotline Miami. Ports, again, I went into this last year in my last year's review video, but I'm not going to go into detail here, but ports are not worth less than multi-platform titles. However, it's abundantly clear how 3DS dug itself out of the hole it was in 2011. So, exclusive software sells systems, not ports, not indie games, most of the time not multi-platform titles. You have to give the consumer a reason to own one. So for people who are Vita owners, having ports or multi-platform titles is fine, because many of us haven't played these games. Most of us haven't, actually. So that's fine. It gives us, a new audience for a new system. That's great. But for people who don't have the system, releasing a multi-platform title where they can get it somewhere else, or a port where they've likely played it somewhere else, isn't a way to introduce or to entice people to jump on your platform. So that's why 3DS dug itself out of the hole. And so having exclusives, it's just really helped the 3DS. So overall, this is a very good year for both, but especially for 3DS, which has had a ton of exclusive games which can't be played anywhere else, which have all done pretty well this year. So now my favorite section, the prediction section. So in this section, I'm just gonna go list off a few predictions that I have for this year, for 2014, that I expect to come true. So, not to toot my own horn too much, but I absolutely killed it last year for predictions. I successfully predicted that Pokemon on 3DS would be in 3D, and that it would be a game changer, and that it would increase 3DS sales. It did all three. I predicted that the majority of upcoming critically acclaimed Vita titles would be indie games, and I predicted that the Vita would get a $199 price cut. Although my timing was a little off, I did say in the first half of the year. It happened in the beginning of the second half of the year, so I was off by a couple months. So hopefully I'll be as spot on this year as I was last year. So here we go. Number 1, Monster Hunter 4 will be localized for the 3DS in July 2014. The game has done well, and Nintendo will help a lot in the localization efforts like they did with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate on 3DS and Wii U. Number 2, we will see more first-person shooter games for the Vita from big, known franchises. Now, the push, now that the push for the PS4 is over and has paid off with 4.2 million units or however they sold in 6 weeks, Sony is finally in a position where they are able to give more love to the Vita and more attention to the Vita, and able to maybe buy some exclusives and entice third parties to develop for it. So I'm confident that we're going to see more than just Borderlands 2 next year. Maybe Battlefield, maybe Call of Duty, maybe one of Sony's first-party FPS franchises, like maybe another Killzone or another Resistance, an actual good one. So we'll see. That's my number 2. My number 3, a huge game from Square Enix will be announced for 3DS this spring. So we're talking on the level of Dragon's Quest or Final Fantasy, big. It's going to come in late 2014 or early 2015 in Japan. My final prediction is that a completely redesigned Vita model will be announced in 2014, but it won't come out until 2015. So I'm not talking Vita 3000 model. 2000 model came out in Japan. It's going to come out here. I'm not talking Vita 3000, but Vita 3000 will come out. But this is a completely redesigned Vita, and it's going to look like an NVIDIA Shield, but with a DualShock 4 form factor. It's going to have clickable analog sticks. It's going to have R2 and L2. It's going to have a 720p high definition screen. So Vita games will still output 544p, Vita's native resolution. However, the higher resolutions will be supported for PlayStation Now and Remote Play, and the form factor will better accommodate both. So this redesign is primarily for people who aren't necessarily interested in Vita games but want something that's going to remote play their PS4, or they want something portable for PlayStation Now. So Vita is it's a great system for remote play. I'm actually maybe going to do more remote play videos in the future and everything, but the limitations of the device with the no back touch and everything really are evident when you're doing that. So this will be the device to remote play on if you don't have a Vita. But it's going to exist alongside the current Vita model, whatever it is, 2000, 3000 at the time. So it's going to be announced in 2014. So those are my predictions for the year. Hopefully most of them come true like last year, but we'll see. So that brings us to the end of the video. Vita and 3DS definitely had an interesting 2013 to say the least, and I really do think that 2014 will bring even more surprises. So thanks for sticking with this channel, thanks for watching and sharing all my videos, thanks for commenting and giving me feedback, and I hope that you guys have a fantastic 2014. I hope 2013 has been good to you. I hope 2014 is even better. And good luck with all your adventures and your gaming and everything. So enjoy, guys. Take care. Bye.